We are live in 5, 4.
And we are live.
We are
Now you
live.
can start that again. You can start that again.
Yeah. Good evening, Hebrews and Hebrews. This is your captain speaking, and we are now hosting Eliana. We will dive right into it because there's a lot of things to discuss today. So, Eliana, good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening. Thank you. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, pleasure's all ours. You are Kurdish woman, analyst, political analyst that now based in Jerusalem, from what I understood. But you basically from Iraq originally?
No, my personal story is a little bit complicated. I was born in the Netherlands. I lived in a few different countries. I am based in Tel Aviv. I do go back and forth in Jerusalem a lot as well, of course. But yes, now I am living in Israel and doing what I can from this side, both for both of my peoples, the Jews and the Kurds.
Wow. Well, we wish for a more gezellig times in our days, right?
And amen.
For those of you who don't know, Ileana is an independent activist that her voice became even more important than ever now with what is happening among the Kurds in Syria. We are witnessing live at hand a betrayal, Game of Thrones, Obama level, epic scale of betrayal against the Kurdish people who are probably the closest, most brave and loyal ally to the US for the last several years, fighting ISIS on behalf of themselves and of America. And for those of you who don't know a little bit context, when the US started fighting ISIS, they needed boots on the ground, someone that knows how to fight them, and they found the Kurds, which was the perfect match for that. A very secular Muslim group that is mostly Muslim, not only, but that is living in that region, a very free society that have equal rights for men and women, very liberal, that even makes some Western countries look, not as progressive as they are. And they align themselves very well with Western values, democracy, freedom, and bravely fought against ISIS and defeated ISIS, and then opened huge camp centers and prisons for ISIS detainees, the worst of the worst, and their families, which, surprise, surprise, some of them are actually worse than the fighter themselves. And for many, many years, until a few days ago, they were holding that line and keeping these monsters away from the rest of us on behalf of them, of the West, of America. But all of a sudden, America turned side and basically, from what it looks like, kind of publicly even said, our need for them, that's the words of Tom Barak, our need for the Kurds have expired, and now we are joining with Jolani to fight ISIS. But in practice, the Syrian government with Jolani, what they did is actually went and freed the ISIS fighters and started massacring Ileana's people, the Kurds, in the most horrific way. If you guys don't mind, I just want to start with a quick video that breaks my heart. I saw this video today, and it's a little bit hard to watch, and I apologize, in advance, Ileana and anyone, but I think it's important for our viewers to see it. They're telling him to bark. They're forcing him to say all kind of stuff. And Awu means bark. So this old Kurdish man is among the many who have, encountered a very terrible fate. From what we're seeing right now, it reminds us of what they did to the Druze, to the Christians, to the Alawites, and now it's the time of the Kurds. Anyone knows what happened with this man? Is like some update?
He initially refused to bark and then he complied, but these monsters, they took his eyes out. That's what happened with him.
They took his...
Yeah. And this is actually not even the worst of the crimes that we have seen committed in the last 2 weeks. I mean, we saw images of a man whose heart was ripped out, his eyes were ripped out. We're seeing horrific things being done to women, the sexual slavery, the beheadings. We are dealing with the worst of the worst people.
How do we know that they took his eyes out? Sorry to say, like there was...
I have some sources, but I can't go into detail.
Khalifa, we can't hear you.
Sorry. They executed. I even published it on my Telegram channel. And if you notice, for the Arab-speaking people, that he, in this video, he said, "Ithbahak, ithbahak, should I slaughter you? Should I slaughter you?" And they did, finally. Like, I've seen the images. I've seen the pictures. This man is, unfortunately, died. He got killed.
This is just
we have a list of crimes that took place that is 2-3 pages long of the worst of the crimes that have been documented, and they're being compiled right now. Unfortunately, not a lot of it makes it to mass media, and it isn't spoken about because there's still a will to keep some kind of perception of this government as anything other than what it is, which is a terrorist government.
Ileana, I want to ask you a question. What do you think what's your opinion about what happened right now in terms of the role of America and of the West? How do you make sense of it?
So we have to understand Syria and the demographics a little bit better for that. Kurds are indigenous to 4 different countries, modern day states: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And actually, Syrian Kurdistan is our smallest part. Now, the fight that is happening right now in cities like Kobane and cities like Qamishlo, those are Kurdish cities. Now, Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, the places where Kurds had advanced to, at a certain point, we saw that Kurds had about almost 1/3 of the Syrian map, that it was under Kurdish control. Exactly. Thank you very much. So Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, those areas are not historically Kurdish areas. But Kurds were pushed by the US to go there and to take control of there because those were the hubs of ISIS. And nobody else besides Kurds could fight ISIS on the ground, could keep ISIS in prison. And Kurds also had to integrate Arabs into the Syrian Democratic Forces, which was formed by America. So that's a little bit of the history. And essentially right now the fight is more, it's like the map doesn't look the same anymore. Kurds have been fully pushed back into their cities. But basically, for America to have control all over Syria, Syria is historically a difficult plane. It's a difficult place. Kurds are not a unifying factor in all of Syria because we're talking about incompatible ideologies. On the one hand, you have Kurds that are democratic, secular, freedom of religion. You can be atheist if you want. You can be live freely as a Jew, so on and so forth. And on the other hand, we have Arab tribes and we have terrorist groups that have definitely a very extreme ideology that are Salafi jihadists a lot of times. So we're talking about very extreme Sunni lines. So in order for America or for America to have control over all of this area, in a way, Al-Jolani is a more unifying factor, except we know that that is not true. Because we have the Druze that got massacred, we have the Alawites that got massacred, we have the Kurds that are getting massacred. And America also spent resources and years in the fight against ISIS. And now we are seeing Syria become a hub of ISIS, of terrorism. So I understand from a side the mentality, but on the other hand, it doesn't make sense. What completes this picture is Turkey and Tom Barrack. Now, Tom Barrack is the special envoy of the US to Syria. Tom Barrack is also very closely aligned with Turkish and with Qatari interests. And Turkey has, for years now, Erdogan have a neo-Ottoman policy of expanding its influence in the Middle East. And we can see that materially on the ground in Syria. In 2019, they invaded a Kurdish city of Afrin, which was a haven in the Middle East of democracy, of education, of progress. And then it was turned into a Palestinian terrorist hub which unfortunately a lot of Israelis also don't know about. And also we can see it in other parts in Iraqi Kurdistan with all of the military posts that they have, and in other places with Turkmens and with Azeris, and just trying to become the head of the Ummah and expand influence all over the Middle East. And Tom Barrack allows that, and America and Trump and Erdogan are very close.
Why is Tom Barrack allowing that? What do you think is the reason?
Tom Barrack is an interesting character. I mean, he has his own invested interests in Qatar and with Turkey. These are financial ties. These are personal ties. So that's the very simple of it. That's the reason. He has interest in both countries.
All the way to justify, Khalifa, to justify America switching side, abandoning their Western mindset allies and joining side with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Because if you see, when Tom Barrack was writing this email, this tweet to the Kurds, join side with Syria, surrender, they will take care of you. Syria is helping us fight ISIS. Now, while he was saying that, in the ground, what actually was happening is that the Syrian regime went and freed ISIS fighters, liberated ISIS camps, so did exactly the opposite. So anyone that is not living in a bubble in America and that opened his eyes can see that right now America have literally day and night chose to side with jihadists, ISIS and Al-Qaeda like, on the expense of their allies. Now, for some reason, Americans are not seeing that, and it's not creating a fuzz there, but anyone outside sees this is clearly what happened. And to think that Tom Barrack will think that this is a good idea to release thousands of ISIS prisoners and to support an ISIS regime, and it's not going to come back and bite Americans or Europeans. Like, these guys, where are they going to go? They're going to go in the first train or flight or ship right now to Europe and to America, and you're going to have them in their streets. So,
but America, Tom Barrack and Trump, America doesn't trust Al-Jolani's government themselves, because on the 20th of January, there was a ceasefire declared for 4 days between Al-Jolani and the Kurds. Now, that ceasefire was almost immediately broken by Al-Jolani's terrorists, and that ceasefire has now been extended after its expiration for another 15 days. Why the ceasefire? The reason is America wants to transfer the 7,000 hardened ISIS prisoners from Syria to Iraq to more secure facilities. So Tom Barrack said, okay, Al-Jolani's government is willing to take over these prisons.
My God.
And they will take care of it. And that's why we don't need the Kurds anymore. But now they are trying to transfer them to Iraqi facilities. So obviously you don't have any trust in Al-Jolani or his Syrian government to actually take care of ISIS. And exactly like you said, immediately we saw them release ISIS prisoners because those are their brothers in arms. Those are their family members. So naturally, that's the result. Al-Jolani himself has ties, he was a member of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He had the 10 million bounty on his head. He was one of the most wanted terrorists. So unfortunately, putting on a suit and trimming the beard doesn't change the character, the past, or the ideology of a man. And everything he has done since he has taken power has shown us that he's exactly who he has always been, a terrorist.
Eliana, well, we dove right into it, but before it started in Rojava, in the northeast part of Syria, it started in Aleppo. And
Yes.
we all, if we can recall or remember, last March, Mazloum Abdi, the leader of the Syrian, Kurdish Syrian forces, signed a treaty with Jolani, basically. So what started it all? Just to and what is the casualty count so far in Aleppo and after that in Rojava?
So January 18th, there was a treaty, and there has been, in March 2024 as well, there was a framework of sorts that was on the table. Now, after, of course, Bashar al-Assad's fall and al-Julani coming into power, there was the question of what happens to the Kurds, what happens to the autonomy, what happens to all of the structures that has been built. And in Rojava, when we're talking about structures, we're talking about institutions, universities, schools, hospitals. A whole state apparatus has essentially been built there. So naturally, negotiations had to take place. Now, we did initially, as you say, see all of these terrible atrocities start in Aleppo. And in Aleppo, there are a few neighborhoods that are historically Kurdish and have been so for a very long time. And initially, it started with a siege on these Kurdish neighborhoods, and then it escalated to massacres and atrocities. And it resulted with 150,000 people being displaced from their homes and going to Rojava, Kurds that had to leave their homes and escape. And now,
was there a trigger in Aleppo? Like, for example, I can tell you from what happened with the Druze people that they, they put a video out there and said that the Druze said bad words on Prophet Muhammad or something like that, just to justify the slaughter against the Druze. Did something of that sort happen with the Kurdish people, or did it just erupted like that?
There's always some chatter, some reason or excuse that is being used. But if you're asking me if there was actually like a trigger, if there was actually something that happened that Kurds incited, of course not. You know the character of the people that we are dealing with. We know it's from the Druze. And I would say that there is also, a push from Turkey, of course. I mean, this isn't only al-Julani's will. Syria has become a bit of a de facto Turkish state. And for Turkey, there's only one thing that is actually standing in front of their expansion into Syria, and that is the Kurds. That's who's right at the border. And this has been a plan for years now. I mean, even when Kurds were at the height of fighting against ISIS, Turkey saw the Kurds as terrorists, not the ISIS terrorists that Kurds were fighting against. And we saw with the expansion, like officially starting in 2019, and ever since, this has been like one of the red lines for Turkey, to make sure that no autonomy is formed on their borders, and there's no Kurdish autonomy. And for whatever autonomy that has exists, for that to be quashed. So in al-Julani, they have found the perfect tool and apparatus for that. And they also, of course, have their own militias on the ground that they have been feeding and clothing for years.
To help people understand, some people asked about the map, so just going to give a quick one. This is not the most updated map, but it gives kind of an idea. What you see here, the yellow, that is the Kurdish part of Syria. They were holding a pretty big part in Syria, and also in the area here, that's where the most of the oil and all kind of expensive minerals that belong to that land. So they were safely guarded by the Kurds. Now, the red part is the big chunk. That is a chunk that is predominantly right now controlled by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, it's safe to say, and the government of Jolani. Damascus is quite here, and the blue part down there and that area here, that is Israel, and the areas that Israel took right now from Syria to defend itself. The Druze mountain, you can't see it here, but it's somewhere over here. Now, the communities that are in this line, Damascus and South, became relatively safer because Israel told the Al-Qaeda and ISIS groups and the Turkish groups that if they come down here, Israel will obliterate them. And anytime they went down there, literally Israel blew them up and send them back to meet their 72 demon-goated heads in devils in Jannah. Now, anything above this area became a free Mad Max land for jihadists. They're going around killing and massacring, and they couldn't enter the Kurd area because they were very strong. They were, up until lately, they were actually holding the strongest army in Syria. So they were considered stronger than all of these forces here. But all of a sudden, all their equipment jammed, their radios went silent, their alliances, just abandoned them. And Syria, with the backing of Turkey, came down and charged in with military-graded drones and military equipment and just went in and started slaughtering. And what you saw now, guys, in that image, that orange piece here, almost all of it disappeared now. So in a very, very quick blitz, one of the strongest forces in that region completely got defeated and almost erased. It's unheard of. And they were the allies of America until a few days ago. All of a sudden they stopped being, and they just literally got erased. To give you a little bit of a context, Tom Barak appealed to these forces as they're being erased and massacred and told them, join side with Syria, they'll protect you and they'll keep your identity. That's like telling Israel during October 7 that they should join side with Palestine and Hamas, while Hamas is, doing what it's doing, because America have decided right now that they want Israel to be Palestine, and the Palestinians have a great plan for the Jews. So Tom Barak will be writing, a letter to the Jews, please stop fighting, join with Hamas, they will take care of you, while October 7 was happening. That is equivalent, to give you a little bit of understanding, that is what's happening to the Kurds right now. In one side, they're being massacred in a way that you can't even imagine. You saw the images, and even worse. And on the other side, they're having the American administration try to paint it as if they actually have a good chance right now to join and become part of Syria. But if you listen to the Syrians, they're saying clearly, bark like a dog, we're going to kill you, we're going to kill your women. And that's like the narrative. Now, Eliana, I want to ask you something. What makes Kurdish women so feared among the Syrian men, like the Muslim, Sunnah in Syria? Why do they fear them so much? Why do they hate them so much?
It's a complicated question. Why they fear them so much is actually a little bit more straightforward. In their twisted ideology, when they die as shaheeds, as martyrs, they will go to heaven, they will get their 72 virgins, and this world doesn't matter anyway. That's the goal. And the quickest way to heaven and to your eternal glory with all of your virgins is to kill kafirs, infidels, to attack Kurds, to kill Jews, etc. Now, they also believe that if they are killed by a woman, they do not go to heaven and they do not get their 72 virgins. So in the fight against ISIS, we actually have records of this. There would be times where the Kurdish female fighters would be going into war, into battle, and Kurdish women, when they go into battle, they ululate, like they make the tilala sound. Mm-hmm. And ISIS men who would hear the Kurdish woman's sound would start running away because they were so scared of being murdered by a woman. Why they are hated? Kurds historically have never been a part of the Ummah. There is an Ottoman saying that was used as an insult, and amongst Kurds we laugh at it, that the Ottomans used to say the Kurd is only a Muslim compared to the camel. Now, a camel is an animal and can't have religion, so if you compare it to that, Kurds are Muslim. But if you compare it to what a Muslim should be, Kurds aren't Muslim. So that's historically been the viewpoint of the Islamic Ummah towards the Kurds. Now, especially with the development of Kurdish nationalism, the ethnic identity has superseded any religious identity because Kurds also historically have been multi-religious. Now, Kurdish Jews or Jews of Kurdistan were in Kurdistan for 2,600 years, and Kurds in and of themselves, a lot of them were forced to convert to Islam but have a variety of religions. Some of these religions are still represented today: Yazidis, Kakais, Alevis, so on and so forth. So, and also they're historically, culturally different. We have anthropologists and travelers from France and Britain in the 18th century, in the 19th century, in the 17th century, going to Kurdistan and to the region And they would talk about how they would be in the Middle East and they would see all of these women covered behind veils. And one of the famous ones says, and then I go to the strange land and I see a woman with her hair free in the wind on a horse with a sword by her side. And these were Kurdish women. So historically, it's a very different culture. And it's everything that Islamists absolutely hate. Women should be in the home, they should be quiet. If they are not quiet and subservient, they should be murdered so that they don't dishonor themselves and their entire family. And here you have Kurdish women doing everything the opposite, being leaders, being soldiers, being politicians.
So explain that to me. Either you or Khalifa, someone explain that to me, please. If you are a Western college student, and let's say you're an anti-Semite, okay, you really hate the Jews, keep hating the Jews. But why are you not standing, you're a liberal Canadian or a New York, white, liberal, progressive, woke girl. Like, shouldn't the Kurds be the prime example that you will side with while you can still hate the Jews? They're not Jewish. They're extremely proud and strong and independent and free women that are many times are seen as equal as men. And often they would even lead men into battle. Like, why aren't they like grabbing that mantle and saying, stop killing Kurdish women, give Kurdish people their freedom? Like, shouldn't that be like the most easy to pick cause for a woke liberal that want to be an anti-Semite, but still want to somehow, not side with Hamas and with Iran, with like genocidal regimes? Like, that would be a default of good advice. If you're watching this, guys, and you want to still be an anti-Semite, which I don't recommend, but if it's too hard for you not to, then that's a good one. That's a good one. At least stand for these brave women. But they don't. Like, activists are just being extremely silent. Why do you think that the activists are being extremely silent about what is happening with the Kurds?
Khalifa?
Well, because I guess they don't have Qatari money and it doesn't serve any, agenda that somehow, blames the Jews of anything. That's the whole story of it.
But all of them?
The thing is, what really breaks my heart with the Kurds, they've been betrayed so much. I've seen the videos of Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor places celebrating the freedom that the Kurds brought them. And once those people saw that ISIS is coming back, they betrayed the Kurds once again and said, yeah, okay, we are ISIS back again now. So this is like the disgusting aspect of politics here. And I truly like, the reason we are talking with you here, because I've been speaking with my Kurds friends and they feel somehow that even from Israel that we betrayed them. And what I really want to ask is what we can do, and what if you're speaking with people in Rojava, what are their aspirations? How can we help? Like the situation is so dire now, so I don't know where to begin with.
So first I want to address this thing of betrayal. I think Kurds are amazing people, really, really, truly special people, very, very big hearts. You will not find people like them anywhere else in the world. But that also means that they are very emotional. And especially in a time like this, it's only expected and it's understandable that they're having very emotional reactions. And they have been left behind. They do feel betrayed and abandoned. The fact is that even in America, there are a lot of congressmen and congresswomen and members of Senate that also share this sentiment with the Kurds. They don't agree with what their government is doing. They are trying to speak up against it. I saw Lindsey Graham is one of the few voices that is very loud, but I've seen voices come out here and there. And this is not the first time. Also in 2019, when the US essentially gave way for Turkey to come and invade Afrin, there were American soldiers on the ground that refused to leave, but they're soldiers, so they accepted the orders. There were people in the Pentagon and people in the US government, military leaders, politicians that were all against this. So, yes, America has left Kurds in a horrible situation, and we can definitely call this a betrayal. At the same time, there are people that are against government policies. And now with Israel specifically, I want to say that there's a huge Turkish propaganda machine that is purposefully spreading false narratives about Israeli involvement in certain deals with Al-Jolani, with the US against the Kurds. This is false. And our officials have addressed these deals. That's how big they became, these rumors. That's how big it became. But the reason that Turkey is doing this is very, very simple. Turkey's biggest fear is an alliance between Jews and Kurds. We're talking about two of the indigenous people of the Middle East that have shared history and shared enemies and also shared destiny. You know, I really believe that if not today, then tomorrow, a year from now, 5 years from now, eventually Kurdish and Israeli interests and paths will be together. And for Turkey, this is very, very dangerous. And they're doing everything that they can do to rip these bonds apart. So we have to do everything that we can to tackle that. And that's part of what we're doing in Israel with, you know, podcasts like this, with talking in the news. But also we're, you know, talking to members of Knesset, and there are, you know, efforts behind the scenes as well by Israeli politicians, both within Israel and also to put pressure in Congress and Senate and in the UN. So it's not that Israel is not doing anything, but I think Kurds need to understand a few things. One of them is we are in a really critical moment right now in Israel with Iran. And, you know, the entire world will change after these critical moments with Iran. It will definitely affect Kurds as well. And it's very, very unfortunate. And I think it's also maybe purposeful that while all eyes are on Iran, what will America do? When will Israel attack? When will Iran attack? That this is the moment that they chose to massacre Kurds.
Yeah, they've been doing that every time. They've been doing that every time. Khalifa was on it last time, was one of the first ones to say it. During the fires in Israel, they started massacring the Druze. And then every time they look for something where all eyes are somewhere else and they start massacring. But you mentioned something very interesting here. And that is the fear of Turkey and the radical jihadists, Muslim Brotherhood, and etc., to have the unity between strong, liberal, progressive minorities in the Middle East. Because if your biggest fear is that the Kurds and the Druze and the Christians and the Jews will all come together and will create a unity, because that will make you look bad, because all of a sudden you'll see groups where women are walking with a smile over their face and where children are receiving, you know, mandatory education and human rights and science and progressiveness, and you are still going back to your, you know, days of the prophet and back to the desert and just becoming more and more extreme and more failing countries. That's a big nightmare for them. That's a big nightmare in so many ways. It's also a big nightmare in terms of the world will actually see, oh, so you can actually have peace in the Middle East, and the way to do that is get rid of, you know, the claws of Turkey, get rid of Iran, get rid of the jihadists in Syria, get rid of Palestine, and you have peace. Because with these groups, you can have peace. And it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, or Jew, because these people are not religious fanatics. Their identity is not in some, you know, die-hard religion philosophy, but actually in nationalism and in, you know, being tolerant to one another. That's one. Number two is their level of failure will become so observant to the eye, because if, let's say, the Kurds and the Druze and the Christians had all a border together and they pushed away Turkey and Syria, then all of a sudden you'll start having science and culture and agriculture and economy, growing drastically in these areas, while the other side is still going back to Jihadistan. And that might even start convincing people among them that their system is just failing, completely failing, and they might want to actually change side. And I think they're afraid of that. Oppressive regimes are always afraid of progress, of science, and of the truth. You see Iran, the first thing they did, shut the internet down. Same thing in Syria. The first thing they do when they go to war, they shut the internet, not just because it's a means to sabotage communication, but mostly it's a way to hide the truth of what's happening so they can go and massacre as many people and put fear in the heart of as many people until they finish the job. Crazy. Wow.
And it's not a matter what you said about, we can all live in peace here is exactly true. It's this extremist ideology. Otherwise, you mentioned in the beginning, most Kurds are Muslim. And yet when the Farhud massacres were happening in Iraq against the Jews, it was Muslim Kurds that helped Jews escape from Baghdad to Kurdistan and to Israel. So it's just about being a decent human being that has sense, that wants to live in peace. This extremist ideology is something completely different. And actually, I'll tell you something interesting. There's the Sheikh Murshid Ghaznawi, who is the leading religious figure in Rojava. He's like a Muslim religious figure. He recently said, I want to call for help to Israel. Until when, he was saying in his interview, until when are we going to be killed by Muslims? Until when are we going to be sacrificed for Gaza and Palestinians? And he's saying, if my Kurdish mothers cannot live, if the mothers of those who are against us not live either, people are so tired of, Kurds are so tired of being killed by this mentality. And it seems like it's okay for everyone to have dialogue with Israel. It's okay for Turkey to do business with Israel. It's okay for the Abraham Accords to happen. But when it comes to Kurds, it's haram. You can't. Because, we're talking about minorities, right? And we are minority compared to this expanded, Arabized peoples and lands, but Kurds are actually a massive people.
There's like 40 million, right?
40 million by a lowball. If you go to the high numbers, it's close to 60 million in the Middle East with 10 million diaspora. And it's such a huge population of Turkey that in 2017, Erdogan, he was so scared that by 2035, according to their own calculations, Kurds would make up half of the population of Turkey, that he started a campaign telling Turkish women have at least 3 children. They're scared. And their fear is different from our fear. We're scared of being, God forbid, raped, killed, murdered, beheaded. They're scared of freedom, peace, Kurds speaking in their mother tongue, having their democracy. And not being able to have their expansionism and have their these empires and neo-Ottoman structures and the Muslim Brotherhood and spreading their claws everywhere. But theirs is also a fear.
By the way, in my last podcast with Akram Hassoun, the parliament member, the Druze parliament member, he mentioned that the Kurds, while the Druze had been slaughtered, the Kurds sent basically gas and oil and all sort of like $3 million in aid to the Druze people. So the Kurds were like the stone that all the resistance to the Islamic Caliphate was based on. This is why the fall of Rojava is such a disaster for us as well, for the Jews, because we are discussing it here, that we are certain that the Jews will be next, like in a matter of time. So this is a very dangerous place. And I wanted to mention another thing. If you know Samir al-Matini, who's like a Syrian Kurdish speaking, like he's Kurdish by origin, but he speaks in Arabic, and he's basically from Damascus and now lives in Germany. One of like the biggest freelancer podcasters or streamers or whatever you call it, and he basically claims a very interesting claim that between 40% and 50% of whole Syria are Kurds, like from the Sunni Muslims, because there are Kurds in Damascus and all over the place. And he mentioned names and families and things like that. Maybe this is why the Turkish people are trying to crash the Kurds, because they can see the danger of what Kurds resemble or what they stand for. So I don't know. It is heartbreaking. But you mentioned that you are speaking with politicians. Are there any interesting name? Can you feel that? Are there any serious actions against, like, to push back against this Turkish agenda?
I mean, there has been some effort also, by the president of the Kurdish Jewish community, and there's some dialogue going on. Amit Halevi, member of Knesset, did write a letter to President to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he also reached out to Congress people and members in the U.S. And there is some push, but I will say that it's definitely not enough. And that's also because the focus right now is so much Iran. I think what's really important also for Israelis to understand, and I don't claim to be smarter in any way, shape, or form, or know more than our government here or than our military. I'm sure that they're aware, but sometimes to me in my conversations and my interactions, it feels like there isn't fully an awareness, or it hasn't fully sunk in what kind of a danger Turkey actually poses. For such a long time, the focus has been on IRGC, and rightfully so, because there's a nuclear threat, and it has been very openly and aggressively and just outright threatening Israel. And we've all lived through the 12-day war here. I live close to one of the missile hit sites. We were in bunkers, and it's very traumatic for the Israeli nation as a whole. And I'm not even talking about all of the terror proxies that they have unleashed upon us. However, I saw a few reports, this was last year. I saw one report that was talking more seriously about the potential threat of Turkey as a member of NATO, of that being larger than that of Iran, of what it poses, and that we have to, start thinking long-term about it. But I will say something else, that up until October 7th, Israel has always been in a defensive position. It always had the standpoint of, as long as I'm not touched and attacked, leave me in peace, and that's like, just leave me to myself and I will not do anything. Now, since October 7th, Israel has started to take a more offensive position. I would say not enough. This is right now a period in history where, instead of going with whatever is subjected to Israel, Israel can shape the region to accommodate its morals, its ethics, its values more. And I'm really curious to see what will happen with Iran and what the Israeli involvement will look like, and what actions America will take, and then how the Middle East will change afterwards. But there needs to be, and I'm sure there is, a long-term plan. And if the Kurds are not seriously a part of this long-term plan, then those plans are incomplete, and they're not what they should be. So, and also American dependence is a problem. We need to be self-sufficient in Israel, because Americans don't live in this region. At the end of the day, it might, like, it's in everyone's interest, it's in the entire world's interest for Kurds to have as much autonomy, as much independence in as many parts of Kurdistan as possible. It will bring stability. It will combat extremism. But at the end of the day, America has an ocean in between all of the mess that is the Middle East. But Israel, we are right here. So for us, our interests might not always align with America, and we have to be able to act based on our interests and what's good for the region and what's good for us.
We've been saying that for the longest time in the Druze like connection. By the way, if you ask me, I just want to put it here. Maybe someone is listening and knows about those things. But if I need to put my tinfoil hat, I would say it has some connection with phosphates. Syria has the largest proven phosphates in the Middle East, the 5th in the world, which is a strategic thing to have, and the United States is trying to put its hands on it. This is me trying to be like in my most conspiracy thoughts or ideas about this. Maybe someone would have thoughts about it, but it is worth mentioning, I guess. You wanted to say something, Mansour, sorry.
No, I actually wanted to tell you that it's not that far-fetched what you just said. I mean, Tom Barak is a businessman who have ties to Qatar and Turkey, deep ties. Trump is a businessman. Trump have a lot of things on his plate right now, so he did a mistake of letting Tom Barak run the show for him. And Tom Barak is treating this as a business opportunity. And in business, they think like it's Amazon, Jeff Bezos buying right now Toys R Us and then betraying them and completely bankrupting them. But in real life, this business that they're playing in the Middle East, buy and sell and bankrupt and betray, is leading to women being violated. It's leading to old men ending their life with their eyes being gouged by a young jihadist. It's leading to ISIS prisoners running freely in the streets. It is a terrible way to manage, the Middle East, and especially to deal with your allies. And I feel like, it's gonna inevitably end up blowing in their face. But I wanted to share something with you guys here, and feel free to correct me, Eliana. I'm just having here, Ranfield, he's my assistant here, and I asked him a question, is before the Kurds became Muslims, they already existed for thousands of years as an ancient people in the Middle East. Kurds are an Indo-Iranian people rooted in Zagros mountains. They love to say the mountain is our friend, and I understand that because they've been betrayed by everybody except from the mountain, who's been providing shelter and strength for them so they can literally withstand empires and keep fighting. They're fierce fighters. Long before the rise of Islam, their ancestors are closely linked to the Modes and a powerful civilization that helped defeat the Assyrians. Originally, the Kurds were not Muslims. Their main pre-Islamic religion, Zoroastrian, a faith based on truth, moral responsibility, and the struggle between good and evil. Alongside many followed Mithraism, etc., etc. Islam arrived later, and the 7th, 10th century, that's when the Kurdish conversion, was starting to happen. Not all Kurds converted. Ancient Kurdish religion still exists today, most notably Yazidism along the Yarish and others. The key fact is that the Kurds are older than Islam. Their identity predates Arab rule, and Islam is later historical layers and not the foundation of who they are. Now, I also wanted to emphasize, because we keep hearing this all the time, Muslims today love to take pride in their most fierce beloved leader, Salah ad-Din, which honestly was probably the most impressive Muslim to ever live.
Yeah.
I think in many ways Salah ad-Din was way more moral and brave than most crusaders that lived in his time. And as much as we like to look at Islam today as very savagery, very barbaric kind of, some even call it modern day barbaric religious Nazism, but there used to be times where under Salah ad-Din, Islam actually looked better than the Christians. They were very honorable, and they were, to their time, to today's standards, a lot of things that were there were complete terrible. But in every religion, in every culture, Salah ad-Din was not an Arab. He was a Kurd. So the Arabs today like to take pride in Salah ad-Din because he brought them the biggest conquest. Let's read about him a little bit. Salah ad-Din was born in 1137 or 38 in Tikrit, modern Iraq, as a Kurdish family from the Raweda clan. His father, Ayyub, and uncle Shirku. I have a lot of friends that are called Ayyub, that are Druze even. That family name still exists until today. They love it. Were Kurdish commanders who rose through the Seljuk military system. Salah ad-Din later founded the Ayyubid dynasty, ruled Egypt, Syria, and Jerusalem, and is best known for defeating the Crusaders at Hattit 1187 and recapturing Jerusalem. Bottom line, ethnically Kurdish, culturally Islamic, politically a Sunni Muslim ruler of a multi-ethnic empire. Now, everybody liked to take pride of Salah ad-Din, and everybody knows Salah ad-Din was Kurdish, and probably the reason his dynasty and his rule was so effective was because it brought a lot of the Kurdish history and civilization into the Muslim empire. But now they're trying to erase that side of Islam, which is probably the most successful and beautiful side of Islam, almost like this, and the Iranians, which were, Persian Empire, and the Kurdish, they brought to Islam much things that the Arabs were not able to bring, but the Arabs now are trying to erase it and push it out. Did I say it correctly, or did I miss something?
I'll tell you something about Salah ad-Din Ayyubi. So right across from me, I have a picture of the Kotel, a picture of Rabbi Ben Ishchai, and one picture of the Rambam, Maimonides. Now, Maimonides was one of the greatest Jewish sages, and he was also the personal doctor of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi. As a lot of Arabs and Muslims these days, when they try to attack / bring Kurds in, like to mention Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, and it's also used as a way to tell Kurds, you are the children of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi. How can you side with the Zionists? How can you not be for Palestine? When Salah ad-Din Ayyubi was the person that, after the Crusaders and the Christians forcibly kicked Jews out of Jerusalem, he recaptures Jerusalem and he allows Jews to come back in. So even when they acknowledge that Salah ad-Din Ayyubi was Kurdish, they are using it against Kurds to try to bring Kurds closer to their extremist anti-Semitic position. But yes, you're correct. Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, compared to all of the other Muslim leaders, emperors, definitely had a very different way of dealing with religions, with different religions, also with Christians. He was especially fond of Jews and had a good relationship with them, and he facilitated the Jews that were displaced coming back into Jerusalem.
Yeah, if you don't remember that famous story, when he heard that his enemy, the Crusader king, was sick, he sent him his personal doctors with fruits and medicine. That's showing a lot of respect to your enemy. And he was also very progressive in terms of integrating science and advancement into the Muslim empire. I mean, if his rule would have been the one that dominated Islam, we might have probably seen Islam today, flying airplanes and inventing stuff. But it was taken back by Muslim Brotherhood, twisted Salafi kind of backward mentality, and has sent Islam back to the Stone Age and never really allowed it to adapt to new culture and civilization. That's what we're seeing today. Crazy. Can I ask you a question, a personal question? What made you come back to Israel?
I don't have a very unique answer. After October 7th, I decided to come to Israel. And, actually on October 7th, I just remember being so horrified and so heartbroken and incredibly angry. And, I just had the feeling of I have to be in Israel. And when people were asking me, why are you going to Israel during in the middle of a war? I was saying, if I'm not there in the worst times, then I won't marry it's the best times. Now, at the time, I was not religious. I wasn't observant. Now I'm, I would say, an Orthodox Jew. But I didn't understand that what I was saying was actually saying I need to be here during this time because we are heading to the times of Mashiach. So that's my personal answer.
Wow.
I really believe that we are seeing an ingathering of the exiles. Jews are coming back home from all over the world. And when I am faced with such horrible things that absolutely rip my heart apart, like what I'm seeing in Kurdistan to my people, that is kind of the optimism that I hold on to, that sometimes it goes worse before it goes better. And I really believe that part of like the healing of this world is a strong independent Kurdistan, eventually, God willing, next to a strong Israel, where we see Kurds, Druze, and Jews and other minorities actually bring light into this world. And for so long, Middle East has been producing the darkness in the world with all of this terrorism, but actually this can be a real source of light onto the rest of the world.
It's amazing that everybody somehow describes this spiritual awakening like post October 7, where like the world just had a clear-cut case of now decide on which part you want to be, which reminds me that what Mansour just said, that the Kurdish roots go back to Zoroastrian, that the whole world perception is between good and evil and things like that. So it is truly resonates to me what you just said, and it's amazing just to meet it from all different places. But if we get practical, again, sorry for putting things down to earth. Are there any plans for more demonstrations or things to do, things that we can do, you know, use this small platform to somehow promote or help, or I don't know, can we do anything?
What I love about Israel is that it's such a small, like it's a very big family. It's a very small country. Everyone knows someone. You know, I am sure that there are people that will be watching this that maybe know members of Knesset, maybe they know some ministers, maybe they know journalists, maybe they know activists. And every bit of bits that we do personally can have effects. In a country like Israel, that's very true. So I think we need to first be educated about Kurds and Kurdistan and what is happening. And I hope in the future to actually come on here and talk with you guys about all four parts of Kurdistan and the grand story. And then we need to just spread the word, and we need to push where we can. So especially, I think, also we have people that have maybe connections in Europe and America. Every person and their capabilities, it's different. Some of them, it's like to talk to your friends and to around you. And other people, maybe they just, they have the capability to do something, but they just don't understand it or they don't know it. Now, what can Israel do? Kurds really, really need an advocate, need a guarantor. Kurds, unfortunately, are horrible at diplomacy, at lobbying. And, you know, this is not a criticism. This is just the reality of the situation, because they have been fighting on the ground against ISIS and terrorists and states and doing all of this without a state. So one of the things that is crucial is for Israel to actually be the voice of the Kurds on the international stage with the US, in the UN, in Europe, and to lobby for Kurdish rights and to put pressure and to be the guarantor and to bring Al-Jolani, and I'm saying this very unfortunately, this is where I think we are at, to bring Al-Jolani and Kurds to the table and to make the terms of whatever will be agreed upon as favorable as possible, with as much protection for Kurds as possible. Because I wish that I could say something else that would be more in the direction of independence and so on and so forth. But right now, the main concern is Kobane has been under siege. Today, aid has finally come through, but yesterday we had 4 or 5 children die from hunger and from cold. They are literally starving a population into submission. And this is not okay. This is not okay, no matter whether or not Kurds were your allies or weren't your allies. You know, we don't hear anything from the humanitarians. So we need to do as much as we can, as fast as we can, to prevent massacres from happening, to protect the Kurds, and then to get them into as favorable of a position as possible. And this means that we need a guarantor coming in, stepping up for the Kurds, and that guarantor is Israel.
Here's a crazy idea. First of all, for all our Druze friends that are listening to this, I think that the case of the Kurds proves the importance of Israel, that you can't be such a huge minority, like 40 million people, but you can, although you are striving for independence, you can't really achieve it because you don't have any exit for sea. The only sea that you can get access to is to the Mediterranean, in my opinion, via Israel. So this is why Israel is so important here, and Israel really drives my gears. Like in these such situations, it's the passiveness. Like, you know, you're sitting in the UN, you always complain about the UN, but once you have such clear-cut cases of people being slaughtered, where is the diplomats? Where is the diplomacy? Each like time or a minute or a second, people talking about the Kurds or the Druze is a minute or a second spared from people, you know, talking about the Palestinians and all. We've been talking on the Palestinians for 80 years, nothing been going over there. Let's just talk about people that they are not into terror, they are not into killing people. These 2 points aside, so me and Mansour, we are talking about, you know, there's a word in Hebrew that everybody is scared from, which is transfer, which is a population exchange. So in my opinion, everybody now speaking on new Sykes-Picot is no longer here. So the way you know Kurdish people, would they like to change their habitat from Kobani, Afrin, north part of Syria, to come, I don't know, to south of Syria to live by the Druze and maybe have a Druze state right next to Israel?
I think someone here mentioned, do you have anything to say about that, Eiliana? Sorry.
I think Kurds would be thrilled to be neighbors with the Druze and with Jews instead of their current neighbors. However,
who wouldn't be?
Kurdistan is their land, so there are other ways of being a neighbor, and I think that is through having Sweda, the Druze areas connected to Israel, having a corridor to the Kurdish areas on their own land. You know, this is the land of their forefathers and ancestors for thousands of years. Just like you know, Jerusalem, Israel, for 2,000 years, Jews in exile called for Jerusalem, called for coming back home. Kurds are on their home. They're just being suffocated in their homes. They're being killed in their homes. So that's where they are. And don't forget, Kurdistan is divided into 4: Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. These are artificial borders. Right across from Syrian Kurdistan, on the other side, in Turkish Kurdistan and Iraqi, those are their brothers and sisters, their actual cousins, their actual family members. One day, Kurds were living in a reality where they would just walk to the village across to see their family members. And the next day, they found themselves divided into 4 and living in different states. So, you know, when people talk about Kurds as separatists, and when I say people, I'm talking about Persians and Turks, etc. I like to talk about this, that Kurds have never been about separating or being separatists in regards to other states. They have been always about uniting their family, which had already been separated by British and the French with the Lausanne Treaty, and of course Sykes-Picot before that.
You know, I agree and I respect what you just said. And I want to take a moment to actually answer to a point that UV9845, which usually have pretty good points to put here. So there's a huge difference. Israel is tiny, same with the Druze areas, and no oil. Kurdistan requires breaking 4 nations apart. Now, let me just throw an idea to space. You know, when the Western nations decided to basically divide the Arab world, because you see, the Muslim empire became so heavy, so encumbered, and so corrupt and inefficient that it basically just collapsed. But it never stopped being a group with a vision of conquering the world. And what the West did, instead of going and did what they did to Nazi Germany, which is denazification of Germany, not leaving a single stone unturned with a Nazi ideology behind it. And then later on, look what happened to countries like, you know, Germany and Japan. From being the worst countries on the face of the planet, basically morally, they became among the best. In the Arab world, that shift never happened because they chose to ignore a very concerning problem that the Arab world have, which is this religious, radical, you know, engulfing kind of mentality that is borderline modern day Nazis, just a more barbaric version of it. It's very extreme. It doesn't allow place to anyone else to live with it. And they want to, you know, kind of conquer planet Earth and enslave the world, which is similar to what Nazis kind of did and wanted, but in a different way, more religious. Now, among the Muslims, there were groups that are not driven by extreme religion, but actually driven by a culture and by kind of a rich culture of thousands of years that came together that created an identity. But instead of giving the Middle East to people like the Kurds, they basically screwed the Kurds and gave the Middle East to people like Turkey, like, you know, the jihadists in Syria, like Iran, like Iraq, and others, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and etc., that did not do justice. So if you can imagine, just throwing an idea, a Middle East that is actually ruled by an ideology and a governing system like the Kurds have, with, I'm sure they have their downfalls. You know, I'm not saying no culture is perfect, but let's face it, when you look at Kurds, you see a lot of colors. You see women with, you know, hairs out there, dressed as they want to dress, very, you know, beautiful, very open, very respected. You see that they are tolerant towards other religions, toward other groups. And you would say, okay, that would have been a much better Middle East to have. A much better Middle East to have. So I think it's not only hoping that Israel will side beside them. I think the entire West should stand behind the Iranian people, the Persians, and behind the Kurds. Because that's an example of how the Middle East can be either completely, you know, not Muslim, like, you know, the Persians want to do, and just, you know, kick out Islam. We don't want it anymore. Just let us be as we are. Or you want to stay Islam. Okay, well, look at the Kurds. They're doing it in a nice way. They're not trying to destroy Israel. They're not consumed by this, you know, fake terrorist state like Palestine. They're actually trying to just live. And I think the West should start first to say, okay, listen, Turkey, out of the way. You're not a partner. We don't want you. We know what you're doing. You know, Lebanon, khalas with your nonsense. Syria, oh my God, this is like Gaza on steroid. Egypt, backward mentality. Get out of our way as well. The Islamists there. You know, and just really call it for what it is. Call it for what it is. Sorry, guys, you have radical, racist, jihadist ideology that is very harming to women, to children, to Jews, to Druze, to Christians, to minorities. We don't want that. The West should be very clear with what it expects from the Muslim world. And only then you'll actually have a chance for the Middle East to become a better place. Only then. But if you keep catering to the needs of Turkey, to the needs of Syria, to the needs of Muslim Brotherhood, Iran, you will never, never have a solution in the Middle East, because these guys are just fooling you. People say Jolani put a suit now to look more advanced. No, guys, this suit is not only to look more advanced. This suit is a camouflage outfit. He says, how can I fool the Americans? I need to camouflage myself. So I will wear this camouflage new uniform, which is a suit, and it's working. All of a sudden, it's siding with him.
And you know, the pattern, if we discuss Jolani, give me one statement of Giuliani denouncing those atrocities. It's been happening with the Alawites, with the Christians. Alawites women are still being kidnapped, and girls and young ladies being kidnapped from their homes and coming back as Sunni Muslims. It's happening all over Syria, and you would not have a single statement by Giuliani saying these terror acts or these atrocities are bad, or we need to investigate to that. Every time that his, those dogs, those monsters go for their bloodthirst and go to seek some fresh blood to kill, he goes down the radar, and he doesn't appear, doesn't say anything. He agrees by silence, which is the most disgusting thing that you can do. And I think one thing I wanted to add to what you just said, Mansour, which is spot on, that it's not only Turkey, it's also Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
Yeah.
Those are very interesting countries that are fighting on hegemony over Syria in front of our faces, and Israel is not doing anything about it. And it's I seriously, like, I don't have any aspiration to Israel diplomacy, but still it is so bad. Like I can't even have words to describe it, how impotent that is. Maybe this is a word, an impotent country that feels, okay, I'm in the Middle East, but I'm not connected to the Middle East, which is stupid from the first place. Sorry, you wanted to say something, Ileana?
Israel, unfortunately, can't ignore Turkey for much longer. I mean, we were talking earlier about how important Kurdistan is, Rojava is also for the Druze, because after the Kurds, we know who's next. Then they come for Druze, and then who's next? We're talking about Syria bordering Israel, so and Turkey having mass influence over that area, and also being the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. So Israel's going to have to face this very soon, sooner rather than later. And I also don't know what the plans are behind the scenes. I'm assuming that, they are aware of the threat that is Turkey. I'm hoping that they are. And what you said about Qatar as well. I mean, we don't have, I think it was earlier you asked, like, why is the West not getting behind this cause? Okay, you want to be an anti-Semite, be an anti-Semite. What about these Kurds? And the truth is that we don't have Qatar's deep pockets. And we don't have about 30 years of building terror networks all over the world to disseminate propaganda. Qatar has been doing that for decades in universities and in other ways, in governments, so on, in the West, in America and Europe. And they have been actually like also recycling a Soviet-era propaganda about Israel that put back in the days, in the 70s, the US and Israel as these imperialist forces, and Cuba, Palestine, Vietnam as these colonized places, victims. And also, like, at the time, there was actually a conference that was held in East Berlin, where it was Soviet funded, where they had Yasser Arafat as a guest of honor. And in this conference, they brought 10,000 young students and young leaders from all over the world to this conference in Berlin. And these people got all of this Soviet propaganda about Israel and US being imperialists and Palestine and Cuba, etc. And they saw Yasser Arafat speak. And then they went back to all four corners of the earth to become the leaders of left-wing student unions and political parties. And they have been pumping out this propaganda ever since. So it's a very different kind of beast that we are fighting that has quite a history behind it.
I think Turkey is definitely something to pay attention very, very carefully now. I think they just mentioned not long ago, Erdogan said something about every country that conquered Syria ended up conquering Jerusalem after, like hinting about the grand scheme of conquering Israel. And I think if they could, they would. And I think Turkey is slowly becoming the next Iran, the one that will have a desire to conquer all the Arab nations in the Middle East and then lead them into what they see the prideful ancient caliphate, which their agenda was world domination. So they're actually thinking in that aspect. And I think the moment that they will try to clash with Israel, all hell will go loose. I am 99.99999999999999999999999% that Israel would literally demolish them. 9999999.7. That 0.7 is because someone might stop us in the way, like literally wipe the ground with them, because they are, dumb kind of country. With all due respect, they're not as trained in battle as Israel, and also here's one thing you need to know about the enemies of Israel, and I think that was always true. There's no unity among the wicked. And it's very easy to defeat them because they're wicked. And when they're wicked, they're oppressive. And when they're oppressive, the people who fight for them are either orc-like Mordor, evil, kind of murderous people, or they're slaves. And the moment that they have a chance to break loose, they will usually betray them. I mean, look at Iran. Very easily, it was so easy for the Mossad to basically have the biggest branch of Mossad agents in Iran. They have more Mossad agents in Iran. They probably need to have like a queue of people that want to join the Mossad because they hate their country so much. Turkey is becoming slowly very evil. I mean, I'm hearing, and I have good friends in Turkey, but I'm hearing a lot of reports from people who went through Turkey, and they just tell you about the way that they were treated. It's just unbelievable. Migrants that will cross the border through there, Christians, Druze, Muslims, doesn't matter who went there. There's a lot of wickedness that is growing in that country. And undoubtedly, they are hoping one day to attack Israel. And I think also Europe and others. And let's face it, they do have a big army. And they do have a very capable, force of destruction that should not be ignored. And I think inevitably, that's what I think, sooner or later, they will get hit really, really hard and really, really bad, because that's how countries fight wars. They don't wait for you to come and attack them. They go and defeat you before. And with all due respect to Turkey, the Western intelligence is way more advanced, CIA, Mossad, and etc. And I think they can see through the lines what are they doing. So what Turkey is doing now, I think, is suicidal and devastating for Turkey and for the Middle East, and it would plunge the Middle East into catastrophic bloodshed if they're not stopped.
By the way, I always speak about it, that, the Muslim Brotherhood agenda, it is like trying to tame a dragon. It is an impossible thing to have, because once you build a state on the ideology of Muslim Brotherhood, which is Erdogan's ideology, it is so dangerous, because it is the same thing that happened to Hamas. Hamas, they don't conceive themselves as ISIS. They don't see themselves as the extremists. They even call the ISIS صاحبين الفكر المنحرف, those with the
enlightened thoughts.
No, diverted, like they are sutim, and they are so off that they lost their way because they are so extremist. But for me and you, looking which is which, they look the same. And why is that? Because once you try to base a state on, the head of the state should be Muslim, in the eyes of the more extremist, you will always not look a Muslim enough for the more extreme guy that will always push you to extremist, to be more extremist. Sorry. So this is one thing. And if we want to be optimistic about the whole thing, because you know me, I always love to finish up with optimistic views. Turkey and the Sunni Muslims are not Shia, and the Shia would, they could be more, sophisticated. They could say something and mean something else. But once you are Sunnah, it's a state of mind that you are, this is why always people that we show them what is happening in the Middle East, they say, what? Why they are showing the killing? Why they are stating that they are going to Al-Quds? Why they are doing, calling for Khaybar al-Yahud? Because this is the state of mind of the people. They go right, and that's it. Like it's like a donkey or a horse with closing the eyes, narrow the horizon, and see the world in a very, very narrow aspect. So this is me trying to say, okay, and yes, we are in a trajectory for to a clash with those forces because it's inevitable, and who doesn't see it just doesn't want to look at it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Exactly. I think we can maybe start wrapping the episode with a video that I wanted to show in the beginning, and I think I saw it on your page or in your story. So let's watch it for a second. I haven't watched it, so I'm trusting that it's gonna be okay. But let's watch it right now.
Friends, but the mount.
The situation in Rojava is really critical right now.
Ex-Al-Qaeda leader came and took over the government.
That are right now facing an existential war.
Kurdish civilians are being
That was
trapped
you, right?
and cut off while the whole world is watching.
The government of Turkey has been assisting these Syrian terrorists as they invade the Kurdish region with bombings and drone strikes.
Because we have no lines or borders, that means we get no seats at the UN.
Thousands of whom fought and died to liberate cities like Raqqa from the fascist menace known as ISIS. And to show its gratitude, the world betrayed them.
Ooh, what a terrible story. What a terrible, sad story of what we're seeing right now.
So many times.
And it happens so many times. I know. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this episode educational. We have our dear guest here, Ilan, who is a Kurdish descendant, born and raised in Amsterdam, moved to Israel, and right now actually became Chazra b'Tshuva, became a religious Jew. Yeah, by the way, how is it, like, how do you feel it difficult? Like, you came from Amsterdam, from Holland. I don't know if Amsterdam, but that's known to be one of the most secular countries in the world. And now you went back to Israel and decided to become Charedit, or like?
No, I mean, not Haredi. I am Datiya. I keep Shabbat, Kashrut, Tefillah, Tznuah, the whole shebang. And it's actually crazy because I took on commandments, mitzvot, very fast, all at once almost. And everyone told me to not do it and that I was absolutely crazy. It has been the best decision of my life. I have never been happier, and returning to Hashem, to God every single day, and living with God every single day. It's truly, like, thank God. I'm very happy.
Wow, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. And I wish you all the luck and all the best in this new path in life. And also our prayers and our thoughts with our brave brothers and sisters in, the Kurdish frontier right now in Syria and all around the world. I know it's hard to hear it, and I know you've been burned so many times, but the mountain is not your only friend. You have many of us back home that are your friends and do care about you. And yes, we are not in positions of power, and we are not in government lobbies, unfortunately. But anyone who's watching here, if you have a way to reach people of power, people in position, could be from local administrations all the way to your smartphone, by just uploading images and stories of what's happening right now, so the world does not ignore. One of the things that me and Khalifa told ourselves that we're going to dedicate our channels, both our channels, mine and his, and the Drewscast channel as well, was to be a voice to the voiceless and to help bring that voice out there. So as you know, I'm Druze, he's Druze with Israeli. Yesterday I was talking about Iran, today we're talking about the Kurds. tomorrow, who knows? But we're trying our best as a small channel to be a voice. I mean, small, I'm saying, compared to the big, gigantic ones. Yeah. We still have a relatively respectful, group of audience here, and everybody's watching, and we want to help to reach more and more. So help us by sharing this episode, by pushing it out there, and also by sharing not only our episode, but any episode or any content that is talking right now about what is happening to the people in Syria, to the Kurds, to the Druze, to the Christians, to the Alawites, to the Yazidis, but also to the people in Iran and everywhere. And have you noticed that all the oppressions that I just mentioned right now are all happening under one religion, which is Islam? Now, I don't want to hurt any peaceful Muslim, because I know there are ones out there, but here's where I draw the line, and we're going to finish with that. I have no problem with any religion as long as it doesn't try to convert me, as long as it doesn't try to force me to change and to become something else, or else you die. That is where I draw the line, because let's be honest, all religions have crazy ideas in the past and good ideas, some more, some less, but it's all about how the humans choose to practice and live it. And I think from my experience so far, the Kurds are among the most beautiful way that I've seen today of trying to live a Muslim life, but in a way that is easily to adapt with Western values. And I think that is something we should sing, that is something we should praise, that is something we should try to push out there. So without further ado, stay safe, everyone. Don't do anything stupid, and in general, don't do anything that I would do. Definitely do things that Khalifa does. He's a very, very honorable man. He's a shepherd. He wakes up every morning and he goes swimming in the cold water and running. And he actually started a new episode now where he runs and he shares his thoughts. And he sent it to me like a numbskull. And I told him, what are you doing, man? Share it with the world. This was beautiful. So I hope you start following this, brave shepherd here. Have a great insight, especially when he's running. And also, Eliana, do you have anything to say about your running hobby, Khalifa?
No, I just wanted to say something about Eliana. Just notice it that I, out of solidarity, I should have eliminated an A from my family's name to be Khalifa Khalif, like Eliana. But sorry. So consider that done, all right?
Wow, your solidarity is admiring.
With the Kurds, yeah.
Yeah. What a brave activist.
We're going to braid your beard in solidarity with the Kurds.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm working on it.
All right. Yeah, everyone, stay safe. And thank you for being here, Ian.
Good night. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.